Hello Internet, no time, gotta talk about Persuasion, let's go! We didn't have time to talk about Anne and Wentworth last week, so let's do that now. An important thing to remember about Anne Elliot is that she's Jane Austen's oldest heroine. By the end of the novel she's 28, Elizabeth Bennet and Emma Woodhouse are 20, Eleanor Dashwood is 19, Fanny Price is 18, and Catherine Morland is 17. In the 19th century, if you were 28, your prospects of marriage were practically over, and this makes the season of the novel very important. Persuasion is an autumnal novel, just as Anne is in the autumn of her romantic prospects. During the November walk, where we see Captain Wentworth flirting with Louisa Musgrove, he picks up a hazelnut and says, "A beautiful glossy nut which, blessed with original strength, has outlived all the storms of autumn." I didn't get the part of Captain Wentworth in the film, also that was a pine nut, but the point is that he doesn't realise that Anne is listening to this conversation, and he doesn't see that on this, as with a lot of other occasions, he's actually describing Anne. In the autumn of Anne's romantic prospects, she has the bloom and beauty of youth restored to her, so she moves, if you will, from autumn into a new spring. Metaphors are fun. We talked about Mrs. Smith in the last video, and she's absolutely integral to Volume 2. She's the one who tells Anne about Mr. Elliot's true character. And let's not forget that before their conversation in Chapter 21, Anne has been genuinely tempted into marrying Mr. Elliot so as to become mistress of Kellynch Hall. What's most interesting about Mrs. Smith, though, is the reaction that she gets from Anne when she tells her about Mr. Smith's poor treatment of her. Anne saw the misery of such feelings. The husband had not been what he ought, and the wife had been led among that part of mankind which made her think worse of the world than she hoped it deserved. Anne is obviously thinking about her mother and father here. Last week we talked about Sir Walter's apparently strained relationship with his late wife, and I think this is another hint. For all of you lexicographers out there, this is called periphrasis, and it's something that Jane Austen uses a lot. We see more of the Navy in Volume 2. There's the revelatory scene in Chapter 23 at the White Hart Inn, where Anne and Captain Harville talk about men and women's love and how they differ. Harville admits that men have more control in relationships normally, and that the pen has been in their hands. The diligent among you will have noticed that Captain Wentworth, who is writing a letter while this conversation is happening, has just dropped his pen. Just as Mrs. Croft takes the reins of the Admiral's carriage, here Anne is allowed to finally take control of her relationship with Captain Wentworth. One of my favourite parts of the novel is the story of the Dalrymples. Dowager Viscountess Dalrymple, apart from having one of the finest names in all of literature, is also a hugely important character. Apart from showing how vain Sir Walter and Elizabeth are because they obsess over seeing her and her ugly daughter Miss Carteret, she also plays a huge part in changing Sir Walter Elliot's opinion of Captain Wentworth. In the concert hall scene in Chapter 20, Lady Dalrymple assumes that Captain Wentworth is Irish because he's good looking. This shows how arrogant she is because she thinks that because she's Irish all the best looking people are, but it's interesting that she says this in front of Sir Walter and then suddenly his opinion of Captain Wentworth changes. From being cold and uncivil towards him the first time he applied to marry Anne, Sir Walter reacts more positively the second time, and it seems that Lady Dalrymple has a part in that. My favourite bit about the Dalrymples is the fact that the Irish aristocracy in the 19th century was often looked down upon because they didn't have an equivalent of the baronetage. There was no written evidence of their nobility. What's brilliant about this is it means that the Dalrymples could be literally anybody, and they're probably not even people of rank. They're just taking Sir Walter Elliot and Elizabeth for a ride, and probably costing them quite a bit of money along the way. Because I can't always be a nonconformist, let's end with the end. Unlike the other novels, I don't actually think the ending to Persuasion is particularly happy. Anne may have married Wentworth, but the novel closes by highlighting the permanent possibility of Captain Wentworth being killed at sea. On first looking at it, it seems like quite a hopeful ending. There's always the chance that Wentworth won't die at sea and that he and Anne will live happily ever after. But it occurs to me that death actually crops up scarily frequently in the novel. Although no characters die during the course of the novel's main events, in fact only 2 characters do in the entirety of the Austen canon, it's clear that a lot of deaths have happened. Lady Elliot, Sir Walter's stillborn son, Dick Musgrove, Fanny Harville, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Elliot, the Viscount Dalrymple. Death has touched literally every character in the novel. With death always being so close in the novel, it seems that an unhappy postscript is scarily likely. Well, that's a cheery note to end on. Internet, I hope you've enjoyed learning about Persuasion. 8 minutes isn't nearly long enough to say everything that we should have said, but I hope the bits that we have talked about have been useful. Next week we'll do something slightly different, but until then, I'm Jonny, this is Anne Elliot, that was a bookmark, and this is the Boffnet.